After perusing 800 tales of domestic strife, I found myself wed into the royal residence. On the day of my nuptials, I instructed my mother to bestow upon me an entourage of over 100 maidservants and guards as my dowry. The concubine who sought to ensnare me in a scandal and usurp my position as the princess was cast into the bed of a drugged man by my guards, reaping the bitter fruits of her own machinations. Within 2 months of becoming the princess, I meticulously scrutinized the lineage of everyone within the estate, including the prince himself. I even unearthed a muddled account from last year involving a shattered vase, which incited the fury of the side consort who plotted to frame me for personal gain, causing her to grind her teeth in rage. Over the course of 2 years in the royal household, I forged paths through mountains and bridged rivers, skillfully countering every hidden scheme directed against me. All of this transpired until the original protagonist, the prince's cherished white moonlight, entered the estate. With her delicate and ethereal demeanor, she invited me to stroll through the garden, intending to stage a scene in which I would push her against the faux mountain. However, as she propelled me towards the artificial hill, the pitiful expression on her face instantly contorted. No, you must be ill. Which garden features a faux mountain constructed of withered grass? 1. When Shiyu incredulously touched the faux hill made of withered grass, where was the precious Lingbai stone that the prince had expended a fortune to transport? Naturally, it resided within the prince's courtyard. The maid effortlessly lifted the sandbags crafted from dried grass, arranging them neatly once more. Did these bags not bear a striking resemblance to the Lingbai stone? It was rumored that a scandal had once erupted in a certain residence, where a lady and her guards secretly engaged in a prolonged affair, hidden behind the faux hill for years. With numerous guards and concubines within the prince's estate, how could this princess not have replaced the faux hill? A hill made of withered grass could hardly withstand even a slight lean, let alone facilitate any unsavory encounters. Perhaps the notion of infidelity behind the faux hill inspired Wen Shiyu. A servant reported that when Shiyu had fallen into the water, as the prince's consort, I naturally felt compelled to investigate. Yet, apart from my cousin's cries for help, no one else was present in the lotus pond. I gazed at my roguish cousin and scolded. "What are you performing? This pond is no taller than half a person. Can you not manage your third leg, let alone keep the other two standing?" My cousin, drenched and his shirt hanging loosely, approached me, only to be obstructed by 10 guards and 8 maids. The social distance exceeded 5 meters. Yet, when she still spread rumors. "Your Highness, what were you and your cousin doing?" I felt a wave of exasperation. With his 3 legs combined barely reaching 5 meters, what could he possibly do to me? However, when I spoke, I said, "Your cousin heard that Miss Wen was frail and intended to personally dig lotus roots to prepare soup for you." It seemed she had not anticipated that instead of defending myself, I would drag her into this mess. The lines Wen Shiyu had rehearsed caught in her throat, and her expression was visibly crumbling. After a long pause, she stammered, "Your Highness, you jest. I am not well acquainted with your cousin. Why would he dig lotus roots for me? Moreover, I do not even enjoy eating lotus." Without needing to speak further, the maid began reading from the account book. This morning, Lady Wen consumed a bowl of lotus root powder with gold leaf, and yesterday at lunch, she had a large bowl of lotus root and pork bone soup with astragalus. 5 days ago, she had half a plate of cold lotus shoots. When Shiyu's face turned ghostly pale, her expression utterly unraveling. "Shiyu." The prince rushed in like a gust of wind, steadying her slender waist. "Why do you look so pale? Did the princess bully you again?" His first half of the sentence was gentle as water towards Wen Shiyu, while the latter half directed a piercing gaze at me.
Vuvangi.
Wen Shiyu whimpered, tears streaming down her cheeks, as though she had suffered an immense injustice. I could not turn back time. Yet I had an artist and a parrot. "Come, let us display it." At my command, the artist presented a series of simple ink sketches, while the parrot recounted the dialogue, vividly portraying the recent events for the prince. The prince's expression froze. He glanced at my cousin, covered in mud, and 5 meters away, and then at the account book handed to him by the maid. Finally, his gaze lingered on me. I smiled brightly. "Your Highness, would you like to see the evidence of how your cousin entered the estate today, and how he was bribed?" When Shiyu's sobs caught in her throat, her face ashen as she cast a glance at me before weakly collapsing into the prince's embrace. "Wangya, I feel a bit dizzy." The prince looked at me deeply, grinding his teeth. "Princess, you truly are prudent. Without foresight, there will surely be immediate troubles. I excel at making thorough preparations." The prince snorted coldly, then horizontally scooped Wen Shiyu into his arms and departed. 2. A few days later, the kind-hearted Wen Shiyu went to the Buddhist hall to copy scriptures and pray for blessings. I was uncertain what her script entailed. However, the scenarios I could envision included ghostly antics in the Buddhist hall, poisoned vermilion ink, and the theft of scriptures. Until a servant reported that Wen Shiyu had fainted in the Buddhist hall. I finally comprehended that she intended to stage a scene where I set her ablaze. Yet, after knocking over the oil barrel, her smile became rigid and absurd. How could the oil barrel in the Buddhist hall contain water? Wen Shiyu screamed, her voice piercing through the tranquility of the hall. "No, it cannot be. It should clearly be." She abruptly silenced, realizing she had almost let slip too much. Anger caused her chest to heave violently, her exquisite features contorted by extreme rage, shock, and the panic of her plan unraveling. She could not fathom how, despite spending lavishly to bribe the servants, the oil had turned into water. Of course, it was because I had outmaneuvered her. The people she bribed had indeed replaced the oil. However, in a place like the Buddhist hall, my personnel conducted inspections every 2 hours, having long since discovered her machinations. "Shiyu." The prince strode in, his gaze sweeping across the chaotic floor and the ashen-faced, trembling Wen Shiyu. Finally, it settled upon me. "What is going on? How have you bullied Shiyu again?" The prince's brow furrowed, his tone imbued with undeniable authority. Wen Shiyu, as if grasping at a lifeline, collapsed to the ground with a thud, tears instantly streaming down her face, weeping pitifully as if she bore the weight of the world upon her. "Wang Ye." The princess used clear water to impersonate oil for the Buddha's offering, and I discover her. She intends to kill and silence me. Wen Shiyu suddenly looked up, only to see my calm demeanor as I quietly observed her performance. I remained unhurried, instructing the guards to move the table from the corner, lifting the floorboards to reveal a hidden pit. "The real oil barrel is here. Lady Wen, next time you plot against me, remember to first ascertain if what you are carrying is indeed foul water." Upon hearing this, Wen Shiyu could no longer maintain her composure, her vision darkened, and she fainted, collapsing onto the cold floor of the Buddhist hall. The prince shot me a fierce glare and solemnly remarked, "Princess, you truly possess remarkable tactics." I covered my mouth with a smile, kindly reminding him, "Your Highness, the ground is cold. Be wary that Lady Wen does not catch a chill." 3. I was busy reviewing the accounts when a servant reported that Wen Shiyu had fallen ill. Her maids recounted every detail. "Your Highness, Lady Wen has applied several layers of pearl powder to her face to ensure she appears sufficiently pale and weak." I understood her intentions. Having grown weary of the account books, I decided to see the commotion for myself. I brought a throng of people to the Lanue pavilion. Wen Shiyu lay languidly upon the couch, her breath faint as she began to moan, "Cough, cough, water. Bring me water." As the curtain lifted, I wore a smile more concerned than that of the estate physician. "Oh, dear, what has happened to Lady Wen?" Just as she prepared to commence her performance, I denied her the opportunity to speak, turning directly to the servants behind me. My tone shifted to one of solemnity and decisiveness. "Lady Wen is too weak to care for herself and is now ill. She requires absolute rest. From today onward, you shall remain in Lanue Pavilion to attend to her, ensuring she experiences not a moment of fatigue. No reading or writing, as it strains her eyes. No needlework, as it burdens her hands, and no conversations with Lady Wen, as it disturbs her peace. Furthermore, as Lady Wen is frail, she must not be exposed to the wind. Not a single window in this room shall be opened, and the doors shall be closed to guests, ensuring it remains airtight." With each command I issued, Wen Shiyu's complexion paled further, this time not from pearl powder, but from sheer indignation. Especially at the phrase "close the doors to guests," her eyes widened like brass bells. Without the prince's presence, how could she lodge a complaint? Wen Shiyu grew anxious, struggling to sit up and protest. "Wait." "Your Highness, I." With a mere glance from me, the matron swiftly pressed her back onto the bed, tucking the brocade quilt tightly under her chin, with such force that she was rendered immobile. "Lady Wen," I furrowed my brows, my eyes filled with disapproval. "When you're ill, You must obediently listen. This is for your own good. Look at you. Your complexion is so dreadful. Why won't you lie down properly? Do you need the matron to guard you? I turned sharply, commanding, you must attend to her diligently, ensuring that lady one remains in bed day and night, quietly recuperating. The maids, frightened into silence, repeatedly acquiesced. Wrapped tightly in the quilt, when Shiyu resembled a pupa ready to be buried, hot and stifled, she longed to retort, to scream. Yet, with my words of this is for your own good, I stifled all her protests. Helplessly, she watched as the windows were nailed shut and her books and writing materials were taken away. In just a few days, when Shiyu was on the verge of madness, unable to rise from her bed, deprived of fresh air, and with no means to alleviate her boredom, the room was suffused with the heavy scent of medicine and her own perspiration. She felt as though, despite not being ill, she would soon succumb to illness from the oppressive atmosphere. Just as she was overwhelmed by dizziness and a burning frustration with no outlet, she heard the voice of the prince, imbued with longing. It was as if she had heard the most divine melody. She fought to squeeze out a couple of tears, preparing the most pitiful expression, and gazed toward the door. Then, she beheld me, waiting at the entrance with a handkerchief covering my mouth and nose. The prince rushed in first, slightly frowning as the stale, sultry air assaulted him. His gaze fell upon the bed, where when Shiyu lay with disheveled hair, a flushed complexion, and a vacant stare, enveloped in thick blankets. She truly appeared gravely ill. What has happened? How could she be so unwell? The prince turned his attention to me, standing at the doorway. I certainly would not inform him that her disheveled hair was a result of sleep, her flushed face was due to heat, and her vacant gaze was caused by boredom. Instead, I wore an expression filled with concern and duty. Your Highness, the consort is gravely ill. The palace physician has advised that she must adhere strictly to a regimen of complete rest. Every word was sound, every sentence infused with care, leaving no room for criticism. Finally, when Shiyu seized her opportunity and, in a choked voice, exerted all her strength to accuse, Your Highness, it is not true. The consort is keeping me under house arrest. She won't let me rise, won't allow me to open the windows, and forbids me from doing anything. I feel as though I am suffocating. Her concern is merely a guise. She seeks to torment me. Her voice was hoarse, desperately attempting to elicit the prince's pity and wrath. I slowly interjected. It is unwise to conceal illness. Your Highness, the palace physician has indicated that the consort's condition may be contagious. It would be prudent not to approach too closely. Within the room, aside from Shiyu, only the prince remained. I and all the servants stood outside, as if fearing contamination. Abruptly, the prince shook off Shiyu's hand and took a step back, his face betraying a hint of panic. Since you are unwell, you should heed the consort's instructions and focus on your recovery. I shall return to visit you another day. Shiyu could scarcely believe her ears. A surge of indignation coursed through her, and her vision darkened. As the prince turned to leave, she desperately attempted to rise and grasp his arm. However, after days of confinement, her legs gave way, and she collapsed to the floor. Your Highness! She yearned to make one final attempt. The prince quickened his pace, his tone leaving no room for argument. Given your condition, you must rest properly. Consort, you have worked hard. The heat here is oppressive. Let us depart. I obediently replied yes. Before turning to leave, I cast a fleeting smile at Shiyu, whose eyes were wide with fury and whose chest heaved with indignation, a smile so subtle that only we could understand its meaning. That smile seemed to convey, since you are feeble and ailing, I shall take good care of you. Watching the prince and me depart, leaving her in that stifling prison, Shiyu felt a sweetness in her throat, a rush of bitterness rising, and she ultimately fainted from her fury. To say she was weak would be an understatement. 3 months later, Shiyu, having suffered greatly, re-emerged, her frame noticeably slimmer, and her gaze upon me was one of insatiable hatred. A triumphant smile graced her lips, exuding an air of assured victory. That night, after several months of absence, the prince unexpectedly visited my quarters. Surrounded by a wall of 10 maidservants, I graciously stated, Your Highness, I am currently indisposed due to my monthly cycle and cannot attend to you. However, I have newly welcomed two beauties into the palace for your enjoyment. Upon finishing my sentence, I signaled with a glance, and the two beauties smiled sweetly as they rushed toward him. Instinctively, the prince opened his arms to embrace them, his eyes fixated on their alluring figures, yet he proclaimed, "Consort, I have promised you that she is the last woman I shall take." Without needing to prompt him, the beauty on his left leaned closer, whispering softly in his ear, "Your Highness, I fell for you at first sight and wish only to serve you quietly for a night, without any titles." The beauty on his right was bolder still, her delicate hand already resting upon his chest, tracing circles with her fingertips. "This is the consort's courtyard. As long as you remain silent, who shall know what transpires tonight? My sister and I are virtuous, and we ask for your kindness." As I observed the prince's growing desire, I tenderly suggested, "The side chamber has been prepared. Your Highness, perhaps you might rest there for a while." The prince took the two delicate beauties to the side chamber, and soon the air was filled with their soft laughter. A maidservant hastily approached me, breathless. "Consort." The consort when suddenly suffers unbearable abdominal pain and requests the prince's presence. I sipped my tea leisurely and replied, "What is the prince to do?" "He is not a physician. Summon the palace doctor instead." As the sounds from the side chamber gradually quieted, the physician returned with news. "Consort. The consort one is with child, already over 2 months along." Just as I had suspected. When Shiyu had deliberately urged the prince to come to my quarters and feigned sudden abdominal pain, all in a bid to summon him away, hoping to retain his affection through her pregnancy. In doing so, I would become the laughingstock of the entire palace. Yet she was pregnant, and I could not act against her. I instructed the physician and the matron, "Take good care of her." The physician's assertion that a pregnant woman should not engage in intimacy meant the prince had a legitimate reason to no longer spend the night with Shiyu. No matter how she protested, the prince could counter with, "I am acting for your sake and that of the child within you," effectively silencing her every objection. Her anticipation for the child grew. She secretly mused that if she bore a son, she could convince the prince to cast aside my presence, and with her child in hand, she would become the new consort. Yet, the physician's remark that the child was likely a daughter left her tormented, unable to eat or sleep. She was certainly not foolish enough to believe the physician's one-sided opinion, until she discreetly sought out a renowned physician who confirmed her suspicion of a girl, when Shiyu was infuriated and smashed a vase in her room, only to injure her foot with the shards. I listened with great interest as the maidservant reported these events, biting into a slice of watermelon. She would undoubtedly attempt to ensnare me. I had anticipated that when Shiyu might use the child to frame me, perhaps by accusing me of administering abortifacients or employing needles to harm her. However, I had not expected her to act so ruthlessly. While I strolled through the garden with a retinue of servants, she drew near and, without regard for her condition, charged directly at me. The guards and maidservants reached out to pull her back, fearing a collision. Yet, she was determined, disregarding her belly, and fought with all her might. At last, she reached me. I stepped back a pace, regarding her warily. "Consort when, even if it is a daughter, she is still the prince's niece, precious and esteemed. Why jeopardize the life of your own flesh and blood to ensnare me?" When Shiyu, appearing almost deranged, howled, "What use is a worthless child? It is because of her that the prince has forsaken me. He has not spent a night with me in over a month." I sighed. "You know full well that the prince has been seduced by those two beauties. It has nothing to do with the child in your womb." She leaned closer, whispering, "Without this child, the consort may face the prince's wrath, and I have my methods to win him back." With that, when she stealthily plunged a hairpin into her own abdomen, the consort cried out in pain, trembling as she gradually sank to the ground. Suddenly, the prince's voice rang out, "Shiyu, what is wrong?" From his perspective, it likely appeared as though I had assaulted Shiyu with the hairpin. "Consort, why are you so cruel? Out of jealousy, you would harm both Shiyu and our child." I found the prince's anxious demeanor utterly amusing. When Shiyu was bleeding, yet instead of calling for a physician first, he directed his ire at me. Meanwhile, a flicker of triumph gleamed in Shiyu's eyes, devoid of concern for the child within her. Yet, after all, it was a life. First, summon the physician, then report the incident. Whatever I said, the prince surely would not believe. However, as the esteemed royal consort, I cannot allow myself to be so vilified. The angle and force with which one impales oneself differs from that of another inflicting harm. When Shiyu's face turned ashen in an instant, she grasped the prince's arm, exclaiming, "Your Highness, family disgrace must not be aired." Moreover, the consort did not act with intention. I must admit, when Shiyu understands the prince quite well. Upon hearing the term family disgrace, he frowned deeply. "Consort," I interrupted, "I intend to report this to the authorities, and none shall prevent me."
Wensofe.
Please reiterate how the hairpin found its way into your abdomen? After 2 years of diligent management within the royal residence, my influence permeated every corner, save for the prince's quarters. When Shiyu, drenched in cold sweat, appeared uncertain whether from pain or fear. After a prolonged silence, she finally spoke, her voice barely audible. "It was my own negligence. I stumbled and lost grip of the hairpin." The prince was taken aback. "How could you be so careless?" Just then, the palace physician and a maiden healer hurriedly arrived. They carried Wen Shiyu into the side hall. Following a thorough examination and treatment, the physician and healer knelt to report, "Your Highness, the side consort has experienced a miscarriage. I have prepared a prescription that must be taken regularly for her to recuperate peacefully." The healer added, "Recently, the side consort has gained considerable weight. The hairpin did not pierce her vital organs, but the wound is quite deep and may leave a scar." Upon hearing this, the prince turned his gaze towards Wen Shiyu, his eyes brimming with disappointment and disdain. He has always favored delicate and slender women, particularly admiring Wen Shiyu's exquisitely smooth skin. Wen Shiyu's lips quivered, leaving her utterly speechless. The prince gazed at her lying on the couch and stated firmly, "Since you are with child, you must refrain from excessive movement." His words rendered Wen Shiyu immobile. Her complexion paled further, and she looked at the prince in despair, her voice trembling uncontrollably. "Your Highness, I shall eat less in the future and apply more scar ointment. Surely, I can," but the prince had already risen, snorting coldly, and strode away, leaving her words to die on her lips. I silently mused, this must surely be the end of her and him. After Wen Shiyu ceased her disturbances, the royal residence grew markedly quieter. The prince occasionally cast complex looks in my direction. I paid no mind to his thoughts. Whenever he sought to stay over, I was either menstruating or afflicted with headaches. After several such encounters, the prince's gaze towards me transformed. No longer marked by disdain and neglect, curiosity seemed to spark within him. Subsequently, he began to recognize my beauty and the talents concealed beneath it. The stewardess of the princess proved to be exceptionally skilled. This year, the profits of the royal residence increased by 30%. She not only governed the servants with prowess, but also diligently managed the shops. "I have returned to the capital for official business, and thought this jade bracelet would suit you well. Would you care to see if it pleases you?" I felt a surge of anxiety. My initial consent to marry the prince stemmed from both parental command and the knowledge of his enduring affection for another. Believing my existence would not disrupt my tranquil life. Men may betray, but power remains steadfast. Over the past 2 years, I have firmly grasped the reins of authority within the royal residence, enjoying a life of comfort and ease. I truly wish to avoid being sullied by a mere rotten cucumber. Yet, constant refusals would inevitably arouse the prince's suspicions. I needed to devise a strategy swiftly. One day, while I was reviewing the accounts, my personal maid rushed in, breathless. "Your Highness, it is dire. The side consort has gone into labor." My hand halted mid-motion, ink smudging a line of figures. How could she be delivering with less than 8 months of pregnancy? It was said she had resorted to some toxic remedies to eliminate the scar on her abdomen, resulting in this chaos. Utterly reckless. I set my brush aside and rose to leave. Let us go see. After all, the prince arrived even sooner than I, driven by years of affection. He paced anxiously outside the door. I arrived with several experienced midwives. "Your Highness, these midwives are renowned in the capital. Let them assist." The prince hesitated visibly. Blood began to flow from the room in basins. Amidst Wen Shiyu's intermittent screams, she called out, "Your Highness, I do not want different midwives." The prince cast a long, lingering glance at me, his words unspoken. In truth, I was indifferent. I had summoned the midwives mainly to silence the whispers. After all, I was the principal consort, and appearances needed to be upheld. Whether she accepted their help was her own prerogative. Your Highness, since the side consort fears I might take advantage of her predicament, I shall take my leave. With that, I turned my back and departed with the midwives and servants. My presence there was solely due to my status as the princess. Did she truly believe I wished to hear her cries of agony? After the last time, the harrowing sounds of childbirth had haunted my dreams for a month. By the following day, having relished a delightful lunch, a servant finally informed me, "Your Highness, the side consort has faced complications during labor. Despite the physician and midwife's utmost efforts, they were unable to save the child." I nodded nonchalantly, "I see." I also instructed that some comforting supplements be sent to Enshiyu, in accordance with the residence's customs. An elderly matron approached discreetly, whispering, "Your Highness, I personally went to see, and the child that could not be saved was a boy." Oh, this was entirely unexpected. My expression hardened as I commanded the matron, "Investigate the physician, discover who has bribed him. How dare they act beneath my very nose?" The news of Wenshiyu's miscarriage spread throughout the capital. The prince had once boisterously brought her back to the residence, and many had awaited my disgrace. Yet, I remained firmly in my position as the princess. Now that the first boy of the royal residence had been lost, many delighted in my misfortune, speculating whether the prince might cast me aside. After all, jealousy and the harm of offspring are grave taboos. My mother, worried for me, sent my brother to personally escort me back to our family home under the pretense of missing her daughter. "Daughter, tell me truthfully, was it you who orchestrated that pregnancy?" I recounted the events to my mother. "Do not fret, mother. Even if the prince wishes to dismiss me over this matter, he will need evidence and witnesses. Without proof, he cannot proceed." Mother looked at me, letting out a sigh. "But you have been married into the royal residence for nearly 3 years. And 3 years without a child is grounds for dismissal." I was well aware of this. Thus, I had been preparing for this eventuality for the past 3 years. From the moment I entered the royal residence, I had hoped to lead a harmonious life with the prince. Yet on the very night of our marriage, a concubine unexpectedly went into labor. It was known that this concubine had been by the prince's side since childhood, their bond profound. The servants came to summon the prince. Having consumed alcohol, he lay asleep on the bed, impatiently muttering, "Which woman does not endure such pain? She is merely being melodramatic. I am not a physician. What purpose would my presence serve? The noise is giving me a headache. Tell her to quiet down, or I shall have her moved to another courtyard." The servants fled in terror. The prince turned over and resumed his slumber. I recalled what I had read in novels and smiled self-deprecatingly. I had thought I had chosen a relatively amiable husband. I had not anticipated this outcome. The adjacent courtyard filled with anguished wails, keeping me awake through the night. The concubine faced a perilous labor, resulting in the loss of both mother and child. I heard the main courtyard still lit, as the midwives trembled in their reports. I observed the blood spattered across them, and a resolute decision formed within me. I must absolutely avoid pregnancy. Yet, as the princess, I could not consume contraceptive herbs. Not only did I fear the pain and harm to my body, but the prince, and even the empress, would never permit me, a royal consort, to partake of such remedies. If I could not, then let the prince do so instead. He cannot bear children, and it would yield the same outcome. In the future, we could adopt a child from the royal family, one I could select to be both pleasing to the eye and intelligent. Over the past 3 years in the royal residence, aside from that initial concubine and Wenshiyu, no one had become pregnant. Regrettably, Wenshiyu's pursuit of beauty led to the demise of her own child. After bidding farewell to my mother, I returned to the royal residence, burdened with worry. It is now impossible to consider the matter of adoption, for the prince remains oblivious to the fact that his body is nearly incapable of procreation. The issue of children has ultimately reached the palace. The Empress Dowager summoned me. Under the scorching sun, I stood by her side, listening to the opera until I felt dizzy and nearly fainted, at which point she finally permitted me to sit. Gently stroking her beads, the Empress Dowager inquired, "What does the princess consort think of this performance? The immortal lady delivers a child?" I was well aware that she had long harbored suspicions about the Wang residence's 3 years without offspring, attributing the blame to me. In the past, she had not delved deeply into the matter, allowing me time to bear a legitimate heir for the sake of my father. However, with the demise of one male fetus, she could no longer tolerate a jealous princess consort who could not produce an heir and sought to admonish me. I immediately knelt before her. "Your Majesty."
Please allow me to speak.
Glancing around, I noticed that the attendants beside the Empress Dowager understood the situation and dismissed the others. "Your Majesty, in these past years, the Wang residence has never been granted the herbal remedy to prevent conception, and I have never employed any means against the concubines, yet none of them have conceived. After the recent pregnancy of Consort One, I did summon the imperial physician to the residence, but unfortunately, she could not maintain her pregnancy." I hesitated, then continued. "If I may speak bluntly, I am genuinely concerned for the prince's health, yet I dare not speak directly. I earnestly implore your Majesty to consider the future of the Wang lineage." With that, I bowed my head deeply, embodying the image of a princess consort anxious about the lack of heirs in the Wang residence. The Empress Dowager's countenance turned ashen, and the beads in her hand were crushed. Silence enveloped the room, the air seemed to thicken, and an invisible weight pressed down, rendering it difficult to breathe. After a long moment, the Empress Dowager sighed heavily. "This matter, I shall handle it myself." I breathed a silent sigh of relief and quickly replied, "I shall keep my lips sealed. Please rest assured, Your Majesty." Upon exiting the palace, I did not return immediately to the Wang residence, but instead took my entourage to the largest assassin organization in the capital, the Dark Abyss. Whether the Empress Dowager would uncover the prince's condition, as my doing remained uncertain, but I must prepare for any eventuality. I was acquainted with the leader of the Dark Abyss, a connection I owed to the prince. Previously, under the strict supervision of my parents, I was a sheltered young lady, rarely stepping outside and certainly not making my presence known. Since marrying into the Wang residence and becoming a princess consort, I have refrained from jealousy, harbored no envy, and did not obstruct the prince from taking concubines. Simultaneously, my series of actions to prevent being framed inadvertently aided the prince considerably. For instance, I meticulously examined the accounts and discovered that some of the prince's trusted subordinates were embezzling funds. I also investigated the connections of the servants in the residence and found many had ties to the palace, often warning him to avoid the emperor's suspicions. I became well-versed in the preferences, birthdays, and estates of officials throughout the court, which proved beneficial to the Wang residence on numerous occasions. The prince, seeing my diligence and thoroughness, increasingly trusted me. I held significant authority within the Wang residence, including overseeing his daily sustenance and well-being. My contact with the Dark Abyss was motivated by the desire to acquire male contraceptives. To maintain discretion, I ventured to the outskirts of the capital under the guise of inspecting a farm, dispatching an unfamiliar woman to procure the medicine. Coincidentally, the shop selling the poison was affiliated with the Dark Abyss, and on that day, the leader happened to be present. Sensing something amiss, she sold the medicine to the woman and discreetly followed her. Upon discovering my identity, the leader of the Dark Abyss proposed a transaction. The chronic poison affecting the prince had been administered by an individual from the Dark Abyss. To remain undetected, it required over a year of consumption to achieve complete sterility. It was merely luck that when Xiu managed to conceive. The moment I arrived, the leader greeted me personally, her expression grave. "Princess consort, there has been an incident. Over the past year, I had transformed into a significant figure within the Dark Abyss. A sense of foreboding filled my heart, yet I maintained a calm demeanor. Do not panic, let us discuss this inside." The leader, whose public persona was that of a brothel madam, led me through the corridor and into a private chamber. "Princess consort, as you know, our former master was the Empress Dowager, but in recent years, she has been severely suppressed by the emperor, rendering her unable to manage many affairs. This has also enabled me to become a prominent figure in the Dark Abyss. They have allied with me not only because I am the Empress Dowager's daughter-in-law, but also due to my status as a princess consort, which has allowed me to resolve numerous issues for them. This time, the Empress Dowager has issued a command to assassinate Minister Liu, the newly appointed Deputy Minister of Personnel." "Liu Ji?" I nodded. "Indeed, but those sent from the palace did not disclose the reason. only demanding that the task be completed within a month. However, I understood the underlying motive. The Empress Dowager was not the Emperor's biological mother, and over the years, she had been at odds with him regarding power struggles. For the sake of her family, she had been vying for authority with the Emperor. The prince, being a wise man, had always maintained a low profile, trying not to offend either side. This presented a fine opportunity. Lu Feng, do you not wish to dissolve the dark abyss and free yourself from the Empress Dowager's control? This is an excellent chance. After discussing with Lu Feng for a while, I took my leave to return to the residence. The guards following me had silently increased threefold. At the entrance of the Wang residence, when Shiyu appeared pale and frail, evoking feelings of pity, my carriage and the prince's arrived almost simultaneously. The prince, with a gentle demeanor, approached when Shiyu. Before she could finish speaking, a light cough escaped her lips, seemingly induced by the chill in the air. The prince, unable to bear it, stepped forward to support her, expressing concern. Your health is fragile. Why must you come to greet me? As he spoke, the prince studied her delicate waist, and the two conversed intimately as they walked inside, oblivious to their surroundings. The servants of the Wang residence were silent as shadows, their heads bowed in deference, not daring to breathe. I chuckled softly. A storm was brewing, and the edifice was on the verge of collapse. Only she remained entirely engrossed in matters of love and affection. After dinner, the inebriated prince kicked open my door, standing before me in a fit of rage. He tore a letter to shreds.
Divorce?
What is the meaning of this, princess consort? Observing his furious countenance, I silently stepped back 2 paces, maintaining a serene expression. The prince and I have not been harmonious as husband and wife. Today, the Empress Dowager summoned me and mentioned offspring in our conversation. I have not borne any children, and feeling unworthy to the prince, I am willing to initiate a divorce. The prince stiffened momentarily, then his expression softened, his tone becoming gentler. I was unaware that the Empress Dowager summoned you. Regardless of what she said, do not take it to heart. Should any concubines become pregnant in the future, let it be recorded under your name. In a month, it would mark the 3rd anniversary of our marriage. 3 years without pregnancy or children. The Empress Dowager could directly dismiss me. I gazed into the prince's eyes, articulating each word. Unless the prince allows me to adopt a son. The prince frowned and promptly rejected the notion. I am not incapable of fathering a child. Why must I adopt? Tonight, I shall stay, he declared, and we shall make an effort together. I cannot bear children, I interjected. Do you not recall? Over these 3 years, I have found various excuses to avoid serving you, one of which being my physical ailment that prevents me from conceiving or sharing a bed. The prince was momentarily at a loss for words. After a pause, he attempted to speak but found himself unable to articulate. In recent days, having witnessed the events surrounding Wen Shiyu, I sensed that the prince had developed an interest in me, perhaps even a degree of infatuation. He had long desired my body. I leaned in closer, whispering in his ear, Prince, permit me to adopt a child. It is said that adopting a son can invite good fortune. Should I be fortunate enough to conceive in the future, I can always return the adopted child. Having consumed spiked wine, and now enticed by my words, the prince, without a moment's hesitation, assented. Very well, I agree. His gaze towards me grew increasingly enamored, his throat bobbing. Princess consort, it is late. You should rest. I smiled sweetly. Indeed, I shall first cleanse myself. When I returned after my bath, a gust of wind extinguished the candle flames, just as the prince was about to summon someone to relight them. Having already reached the bedside, I softly remarked, Prince, I am shy. The room was filled with soft moans. I stood outside the courtyard, gazing at the moon above. Soon, everything I desired would come to fruition. On the following day, the Empress Dowager sought an excuse to summon the prince into the palace. Her intentions were clear, even without the need for spies, however. The poison from the Dark Abyss Pavilion eluded the imperial physician's detection. 3 days later, I began to spread rumors about adopting a son, citing the reason as a desire for a child. Within the royal residence, when Shiyu had just given birth, and no one would suspect the prince's impotence. All regarded my longing for a child with amusement, yet none pondered further. The Empress Dowager did not voice any objections. Half a month later, The adopted son I had personally selected entered the residence. He was a child of unfortunate fate, yet remarkably astute. He knelt respectfully, expressing gratitude. "Thank you, mother, for rescuing me from peril. From now on, I shall heed your every command." With the matter of my adopted son resolved, my attention turned to the Vice Minister Liu. To formally introduce my son, I hosted a banquet, inviting several familiar families to gather. The festivities were lively, and Vice Minister Liu arrived with his wife. Upon seeing him, the prince was visibly excited, eager to forge connections with the Ministry of Personnel, unaware of the close ties between the princess and Madame Liu. I offered him a composed smile, assuring him, "I shall explain later, Your Highness. Please, go engage in conversation with Vice Minister Liu." As the banquet unfolded with toasts and merriment, an unexpected calamity struck. A dancer's sword suddenly lunged toward Vice Minister Liu. Guards rushed forth to intercept. Amidst the chaos, an arrow soared through the air, aimed directly at the prince. In a moment of bravery, when Xiu dashed forward, "Be cautious, Your Highness," I inwardly cursed, unwilling to see my plans thwarted. I reached out to pull the prince beside me, intending to feign panic to ensure he was struck by the arrow. To my surprise, he reacted swiftly, enveloping me in his embrace, and we tumbled together. The arrow grazed his arm, merely tearing his garment. As we fell, I found myself half atop the prince. He gazed up at me, his eyes shimmering with emotion. "Princess, I never anticipated you would save me at such peril." I endured the pain in my arm, softly replying, "You have also saved me, Your Highness. I am relieved you remain unharmed." Yet I knew the order I had issued. The assassin would not relinquish their pursuit so easily. The sword, like a silver dragon, darted past the guards, approaching swiftly. The prince possessed some martial skill. He hastily raised his sword to defend himself. After several exchanges, he began to falter, sustaining a wound on his arm.
Witnessing this,
I exhaled a quiet sigh of relief as the tension within me dissipated. Our eyes inadvertently met, when Xiu had been observing intently, yet unlike the others. Her focus was not on the prince and the assassin but solely on me. My expression of relief was captured by her wide, astonished eyes as she clutched her mouth in shock. I cast her a glance, lifting my chin slightly, my gaze devoid of fear. The banquet concluded hastily. Vice Minister Liu, injured, was carried back to his residence. It was later reported that His Majesty dispatched imperial physicians who discovered the poison matched that of a murder case from years past. The emperor was incensed and ordered a thorough investigation. Lu Feng disguised herself as a maid to visit me at the royal residence. "Princess," she began. I raised my hand to signal her to sit and poured her a cup of tea. "The plan has been set in motion. The Emperor's men have traced the Dark Abyss Pavilion's allegiance to the Empress Dowager." I nodded in agreement. Those with ulterior motives need not be dismissed. We must provide the Emperor and Empress Dowager with some scapegoats to convince them that the Dark Abyss Pavilion has indeed been eradicated. 5 days later, the assassin organization, the Dark Abyss Pavilion, was uprooted by the Emperor. The populace lauded the decision, and storytellers' teahouses were filled to capacity. However, it was whispered that the Empress Dowager had fallen ill, while the prince lay in the royal residence, nursing his wounds, neglecting to visit her. A month passed, and the Empress Dowager voluntarily proposed to leave the palace for a temple retreat. The emperor consented, yet the prince, confined to his sickbed, did not accompany her. I went to see the Empress Dowager off. She was no longer the stern figure of the past. Her gaze towards me was softened. She grasped my hand. "Princess, the royal residence shall rely on you from this day forth." I nodded, tears brimming in my eyes. As I watched her procession fade into the distance, I wiped away my tears, reflecting, "Empress Dowager, you were wise throughout your life, yet did you ever consider being outmaneuvered in the end? You believed the prince's poisoning was orchestrated by the emperor, but in truth, it was I." Seasons changed, and another year of peach blossoms bloomed. The prince, having suffered for over a year, ultimately succumbed. The emperor sent emissaries to convey his condolences. With reddened eyes and a hoarse voice, I struggled to speak. My son, kneeling beside me, expressed gratitude on my behalf. That afternoon, a decree arrived, declaring my 7-year-old son the heir to the throne. All was settled. I granted freedom to the concubines within the royal residence. Most departed with silver, while a few chose to remain. When Shiyu, like a drifting weed, feared me and sought to flee, yet had no place to go. She knelt before me in tears, pleading, "I beseech you, princess, for the sake of my silence, grant me a chance to live." I held the teacup, taking a delicate sip. When, "You are free to speak as you wish. But do you think they would believe your words, or deem you mad?" She trembled, bowing repeatedly. "Princess, it was entirely my fault in the past. I implore your mercy." A mere threat caused her to refer to herself as a servant. As a fellow woman, I have never wished to eradicate the concubines entirely. When Shiyu, since you are unwilling to leave with silver, I too do not desire to see you again. Go to the estate. Upon hearing this, when Shiyu prostrated herself in gratitude, "Thank you, princess," the royal residence fell into a profound tranquility. Only the sound of my son's clear voice reading and the gentle whisper of the wind through the garden remained. The peach blossoms flourished beautifully, and each step I took was upon a path strewn with vibrant petals. The story concludes here. Thank you for listening. We shall meet again in the next tale.